Hello everyone, and welcome to my review for Kengan Omega Chapter 135. Apologies for not having a reaction today. I've literally been in the car since like 6 o'clock this morning, and I just got home like an hour ago, so I really did not have a good chance to do a reaction. I don't even have like the best recording conditions for this review right now, so I'm gonna try and make it a little quicker. I'm not really interested that much in talking about the actual contents of this chapter. Well, that sounds bad. The events of the chapter. Here, let me give you a quick rundown. We get a short flashback to Lolong versus Kuroki, the end of the battle. We have a bunch of, internal monologue from Ohma and Lolong. We find out that what Ohma did last chapter is he pretty much used the advance for like a split second to get a gigantic speed and strength boost, so that he's able to use it without really putting himself at risk to counters from Lolong, which is a pretty good strategy, and it's interesting to see Ohma use the advance that way. Then we get some commentary from Carla, who says, yeah, Ohma has lost to Ryan more times than he's won. However, as time has gone on, he's been progressively winning more and more of their fights, like every month. So he's getting stronger, and that means he definitely has the potential to beat Lolong. The end of the chapter, Lolong uses like a pressure point thing on Ohma's arm to get control over him, brings him to the ground, and then starts kneeing him in like the side. And Lolong thinks about how he was not assured of his victory, but instead had some kind of premonition. And the chapter cuts off before we actually see what this premonition is, which this chapter ends like so abruptly that it seems like we're getting a part 2 of this chapter. And this chapter is titled Climax, and if we're getting a part 2 to a chapter titled Climax, that probably means that next chapter is the end of the fight. And these are where my issues come in. So, to talk about this fight on the whole, it's a good fight. It's a good fight. I haven't gone back and reread the whole thing, but from like a choreography and technical perspective, it's good. However, there is a problem with it. And if you go back and you watch some of my previous reviews for the last few chapters, you'll see what the problem is. It's kind of a subtle thing. Basically, almost every chapter, I'm like, oh boy, they're finally gonna get serious now. There's finally gonna be a really big escalation in the fight. Things are gonna get crazy. We're gonna have this big turning point moment. And then the moment doesn't happen. This fight has frankly been in kind of a state of limbo. Basically, every time we seem to get a big turning point in the fight, it's nullified. Lolong takes the big elbow to the back of the neck, but he went limp, so he didn't actually take damage from it. He doesn't seem to get much more serious. He just changes up his tactics a little bit, rotating shoulder punches. Then he seems to knock Ohma out. But no, Ohma wasn't actually knocked out. He had just copied the limp bone thing. I've already talked about my issues with that in the past. And then they kind of go back to generally doing the same thing. The biggest escalation has been Ohma starting to use the advance, but even then, for the most part, it's been like kind of just them going back and forth without any super crazy escalation happening. Until now, when we're apparently at the end of the fight. It's a fight that's never felt like it really got going. What are some good examples from previous fights in the tournament? Falcon versus Rihito, the moment where Rihito finally starts using Razor's Edge. And it seems like the fight's finally going to start turning around. The dynamic of the fight really changes. You become more invested in it. The fight becomes more exciting at that point. What's another one? Nicholas versus Okoye. We have a few points of escalation in that. The big one being basically, when Okoye chomps down on Nicholas. That's a big point of escalation, and then they go absolutely insane from that point. Liu versus Nitoku, we had a couple. Like the moment where it seemed like Liu got knocked out, where he was hallucinating, and then he changed up the fight from there. and then towards the very end where he broke his own arm to get out of the submission. And then in the previous fight, we had several. We had when Faye revealed he was the Tiger's Vessel, started using the Nico style, and then we had the reveal of Divine Demon. Those fights had big moments. They had important moments that kind of altered the flow of the fight a bit. Whereas for this fight, we've been going on for like 5 chapters now, 5-6 chapters, and the flow of the fight has not really changed at all. It's kind of felt like it's just been the same for like 6 chapters. What it's been has been good, but I don't know if I'd go so far as to say it's been great. And the lack of escalation or turning points, there's been some degree of escalation, but nothing major. Nothing that really feels like it super raises the stakes of the fight, doesn't feel like it's getting crazy or we're kicking into high gear. It's not there. And as a result, the fight feels like it's been in its beginning stages for the entirety of it, and then it seems like it might be ending next chapter. No, if it's not. And it keeps going, and we actually get like a big moment next chapter, and then things get switched up. Then this problem is not a problem anymore. It's resolved. But if it doesn't, that's going to be a bit of an issue. I think especially for Lolong it's an issue, because, well, Lolong's been hyped up for the whole tournament as being like fucking insane, like just being absolutely off the walls powerful, and we really haven't seen anything that displays that. Like, he uses basics, and we know with people like Kuroki, the mastery of basics makes you top tier. But Kuroki still had really impressive feats. He still did really impressive stuff. And Lolong really hasn't done much. Like, his most significant feat was seemingly knocking out Ohma, but then it turned out he just didn't. And then the way this chapter ends, it makes it seem like he's about to get fucking annihilated next chapter or something, which I'm not a fan of. So I think whatever we get next week is gonna make or break this fight. I don't think it's the best in the turn. Well, I need to reread it first. It hasn't made me feel the same kind of excitement or investment as some of the previous fights in the tournament. The choreography has been really good. The art, I don't know if the art's been exactly better, but this has been since we started getting the official translation, so like the scan quality is higher. So that's probably a little bit of a factor. But I just don't feel as invested in the fight. I'm not a big fan. I think Ohma should have stayed dead, personally, so I don't really care about Ohma all that much. My primary interest in this fight was seeing what we would get from Lolong, and he hasn't really given us much. He uses Salat, he has pre-initiative, he's an all-rounder, he's the ultimate all-rounder, apparently, and he seems to have some kind of understanding of how to use pressure points to get control of an opponent, and like, that's great and all, but he hasn't done anything, like, super impressive with it. Like, yeah, him beating on Ohma is impressive, but we haven't gotten, like, a big moment where we're like, holy shit, Lolong is so powerful, like we did with characters like Kuroki or Agido. And since Lolong is supposed to be on that level, and he hasn't really had a moment like that, he doesn't feel like he's on that level. So, we're gonna see what happens next chapter. Once again, I think that is going to solidify what my opinion of this fight is. You guys, be sure to let me know what you think in the comments. I'm sure plenty of you are going to disagree with me. I am going to have to reread this before next week's chapter, just so that I really fully, comprehend. I've mulled everything over. I have a big picture idea of what the fight looks like on the whole. And then we're going to see how it works out, alright? So, yeah, with that, that's all for this week's review. I'm not going to do the usual plugs and such, because I'm still kind of pressed for time right now. So, thanks for watching. I'll see you guys next week. Subscribe if you haven't already. Until next time, take care.